All right, we're going to be doing a tiny home gigantic profits webinar today, and just give me a few minutes. We're trying to get everybody set up. Hey guys, we'll start here in a few minutes. Give me about 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll get running on this. We'll get started here, guys, pretty soon. Our guest speaker is logging in right now. A lot to cover today, so glad you guys could all come on in. Hey, Nate, let me know when you can hear me.
Hey, good morning. Sorry about being a few moments late. I had some connectivity issues, but I'm here now. So
Awesome.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for jumping on. We're excited to kind of deep dive into the tiny home world.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. I've got a little presentation prepared, and then I'm obviously here to answer any and all questions. So happy to do that. However you'd like to kind of run this. So.
Yeah, let me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'll give you access to kind of open up your presentation. But let me give you access. Stop screen. There we go. On the bottom there, it should be able to present button.
Yeah, I see it.
Cool.
Okay. So I don't know, being that I haven't used this software before, I'm not sure if I'll be able to see the chat, but if there's any comments or anything like that, just feel free to stop me at any point, and then we can talk about things. But I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen here?
Not yet. There we add to stage. There we go.
Okay, so how's that? Can you see the presentation?
Yep, we got you.
Is it full screen?
Yeah, it has us on the side, and then we are good to go.
Sweet. Sounds good. Well, thanks everybody for being here. My name's Nate Stanley. I'm the founder of Stanley Tiny Homes. We founded our company like 4.5 years ago. It was largely in response to some fires that were going on, and we started in my driveway. Started building my grandparents a home because their home was threatened by fires. Just so happened to be on wheels because they were living in an RV at the time, as some older folks do. And that turned into a whole thing where I left medical school and began working on tiny homes. We've been the producer of tiny homes for the city of Portland, and we produced over 100 sleeping pods for them, and then we've produced a few dozen tiny homes on wheels as well. So our business is kind of split into two modalities. One that's really focused on the housing problem, and the other is custom and spec model tiny homes. The first slide is I think probably the most important one, or the second slide here, where we're really talking about like what is a tiny home. Most municipalities do not have good definitions or understanding of tiny homes, and when you look at properties and you're thinking about putting a tiny home on those properties, usually the rules will be different and the nomenclature will be different because there's just not a standardized like nomenclature. Like people really haven't created that standard yet. So for our purposes in this talk, when we talk about tiny homes, we're specifically talking about tiny homes on wheels. So something that comes on a trailer. All of our homes are built like traditional stick-built homes. We have licensed electricians and plumbers that do all of our electrical and plumbing. They're built just like a regular home. But some municipalities call them park model RVs. Some municipalities call them tiny homes, and it just kind of depends. It's a bit of a gray area at the moment until kind of like the zoning and stuff catches up with us. And also for our talk, our tiny homes are almost always a complete home. So they have a full kitchen, full bathroom with laundry, and they have a sleeping area of some sort. That differs a little bit depending on the size of the home and just the necessities of the specific area. So tiny homes can be a really great like they can be really great for a lot of reasons. They are often like the cheapest way to add livable space to your property, and it's a non-permanent way to add livable space to your property. So, we can bring in a tiny home in 3 to 6 months, which is way less than usual than like a traditional ADU or something along those lines. We can usually do it at about, like a quarter to half the price of a traditional ADU. And then the net gains are similar to that of an ADU because you can rent a tiny house out in the Portland area for between $1,500 and $2,500 a month, depending on the amenities and other things. And you can put them just about anywhere. If we can't access the backyard or if we can't access the property, we can crane them in. And so there's lots of ways to get them in places. They're cheaper than traditional modalities, and then they're a little nicer too because our units are between 200 and 400 square feet. There's using a nicer flooring or a better cabinet or countertop or something along those lines. It really is cheap to do that because it's so much less space. So, you get a really premium product at a reduced price and at one that's mobile. So another benefit of tiny homes is if, it doesn't work in your area, or if you hate it and you decide, or your clients decide, hey, I really actually hate having somebody else living on this property with me, then they just sell it and somebody comes and hooks up to it and buys it and takes it off the property. So it's relatively low risk for our homeowners and for our folks that are purchasing these for rentals and in lieu of an ADU. Other benefits to using them instead of an ADU specifically are that you don't have construction folks coming to and from your house all the time. The backyard isn't a mess for 6 months to 2 years, depending on how things go. And there's very little involvement from the city or local municipality. There's also no SDC fees. So we're working with somebody right now who wants to put 2 of these on his property in the Portland area. And his SDC fees are the cost of 2 tiny homes. So it becomes a pretty easy sale on our part when when it just is that big of a savings. It also doesn't increase your property taxes because these aren't seen as real property in the Portland area. So there's 0 increase to your property taxes, and the the purchase of the home can actually be written off by either claiming it as a park model RV. And this year you can take 60% off your taxes. If you're a real estate professional, 60% of the cost of the home off your real estate taxes. And then take, I think it's 10% a year off after that. Or you can claim it as personal property because it is technically a vehicle, and you can get 100% off the tiny home in the first year if you have that much income where you're paying $100,000 in taxes or something like that, where your tax burden is that much. Any questions so far? Anything that's come up?
Just a quick question, like, do you have to follow HUD standards, or kind of how does that fall in terms of the transportation world being a vehicle?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so there is no standard for tiny homes right now, and it makes it a very almost dangerous place to be, just because anybody can build these things in their backyard. And so we follow something called the NOAA standard, which they inspect all of our units and they do video inspections. It's totally voluntary on our part. But as the industry becomes more and more standardized, I think it's really important that we follow the things that will eventually be, because eventually they're going to come in and say that we need to follow some sort of a standard. And what we follow right now is the Park Model RV standard, which is close to the HUD standard. But it went through, it's called ANSI 119.5. And that's what NOAA uses for all of their inspections. So our units in particular are inspected to that standard. We use licensed electricians and plumbers for all of our electrical and plumbing needs. That being said, that isn't true of every tiny home manufacturer, especially folks that you may find like on Craigslist or other marketplaces. And so it's important to be thinking about those sorts of things if you decide a tiny home is right for you, and if you look into like purchasing those. So it's kind of the Wild West right now, and I think it's important to make the decision on who builds your home pretty from an educated position. Does that answer your question?
100%. That was what I
Yeah.
was kind of getting to, is like, this is an emerging market. And I think different counties, different municipalities have different ways they look at tiny homes based on building codes. And is it a vehicle? Is it not a vehicle? Is it on a permanent foundation? Is it on wheels? And I think that's a question we get a lot as real estate professionals. So thanks for covering that.
Yeah, and we have gotten around some of those rules in the past with as far as it being on wheels or not on wheels. And we can build the HUD standards. And I mean, it's just filling out more paperwork on our end, if that's a necessity of the local county. And then if it does need to be tied to a foundation, we've gotten around that by, just pouring 2 or 3 piers and then hooking it to the foundation somehow and making it no longer a mobile structure, taking the wheels off, those sorts of things. We've been able to get around some of that. And our folks are really happy to call local municipalities and really see what the rules are and see ways that we can make it happen. But yeah, it is an emerging market, and it's one that the government is slow to catch up to. And so there's a lot of really good consideration there. Anything else before I move on?
I think you're good.
Sweet. So tiny homes in general require less maintenance just because they're smaller. And then with that, if you're using them as an Airbnb or a medium-term rental, I mean, the cleaning fees are less. All of the, it just takes less money to run them. It takes less energy, water, all of those sorts of things. One thing that isn't mentioned here, but all of our units have traditional flush toilets, and we can do composting or incinerating toilets, but we really don't think it's worth the hassle. They have traditional flush toilets and a mini split for heating and cooling. And they're really comfortable, and they really do feel like kind of just a home. And stepping inside one, I mean, it really feels like you wouldn't need much more space. But yeah, everything that we build is just as a traditional home. It's to HUD standards or better, and it's to 119.5 or better. And we hope that these things outlive us. We've shown in our market that our homes are appreciating, and they're following the housing market more closely than they are following like a traditional RV or vehicle market. And that's because traditional RVs are built to be taken on the road, and they kind of get demolished if you live in them for your full time. And these are really built to be lived in. There's traditional framing. It's not 1x2s, and it's not plastic paneling. They're also fully custom, so we offer a spec model line that makes things really easy for our folks. But we also have an in-house designer and a team that's willing to create whatever is best for our clients. This build that we're looking at here on the screen is actually a kind of conference space that's going down to a resort in California, that's being paired with a sleeping unit. And this space is going to have a big conference table, and it's going to be called the Think Tank. And that's why it kind of has a nautical theme and the rusted siding and all that other kind of stuff. And then when they have weddings, which it's a wedding venue, it'll also be the drunk tank, and there'll be bunk beds in there where people who can't make it to their tiny home for sleeping can just kind of get thrown in there so that they can sleep. So it's a pretty fun idea, and we're really open to all of those sorts of things. And we think the custom work is really what gets us out of bed in the morning. But there's a lot of reasons that tiny homes can really be a good case for a lot of things. They also make great backyard offices and salons and like all those other sorts of things without a lot of the fees, and at a fifth of the cost. So yeah, I think that there's quite a few applicable uses. Specifically for this group, we get contacted by investors all the time that are looking to build 20 to 30 unit villages. And the biggest hurdle for those folks ends up being zoning and getting the appropriate zoning, as with most projects. But there's good reason that we're getting contacted by tons of people about that, and the reason that we're doing lots of that is it's a really inexpensive way and a great adjunct to like traditional construction. So, you can buy a tiny house for, if we're doing 10 or 20 of them, you can buy them for less than $100,000. And then if you're renting them out as a short-term or medium-term rental, say that you're getting $250 a night at 70% occupancy, you can pay these things off in like 3 years, which is actually on a future slide, but I'll mention it here. So, I think that there's a lot of great benefit. And then, if you have something where then it doesn't work out, or a partner falls through or something like that, so you can sell them and people can hook up to them and take them away. So there's a lot of benefit for folks that are looking at larger villages, and the market's just pretty hot right now. And so people want to be staying in these things, and they want to have a comfortable experience. For real estate professionals, which these overlap obviously, but especially within the Portland area, these tiny homes really don't require much in terms of space. Within the Portland area in particular, all that's required is that they be put behind the front facade of the house. And so, anywhere behind that front line of the primary structure, you can put a tiny home and live in it pretty comfortably. And then you can rent it out as either a medium term or a long term rental. Immediately, that offers an incredible benefit to folks that are middle income, that want to get into property, but say they're missing $500 from their budget. All of a sudden, they have something in their backyard that produces $1,500 to $2,500 worth of monthly revenue, depending on how they structure it. And for their down payment, and we'll talk about financing later, but it can be a problem solver for a lot of folks. Leastwise, that's what we found. Zoning, this tends to be kind of like one of the most important areas to talk about, but also the one that's kind of the most fluffy. We don't really, it's per county and per municipality. It kind of just is all over the place. So it really takes a discussion with local zoning officials, and usually that discussion is more so educating them on what you're actually trying to do with a tiny home and what a tiny home actually is, than it is anything else. And we have folks on our team, like I said before, that are happy to have those conversations and facilitate those conversations with folks that we already know here locally. And right now, within municipal zones, it actually is easier to place a tiny home than a lot of rural zones. That being said, some of that is about risk tolerance, and a lot of county officials that we've talked to who will talk about risk tolerance and say, well, you can do whatever you want on your property, but X, Y, or Z could happen, and but we're happy to have those discussions. Setbacks. So because these things are vehicles, traditional setback rules don't apply, and you can place them, just about anywhere you can back them in and fit. So like this one on the right, we're looking at, it's pretty close to that fence there. And that one was designed to actually match the house. And so it does a great job of matching the house. Something else that I didn't touch on, but I will here because there's an image of it, is our units, our homes either have a downstairs sleeping area with a bedroom, or they have an upstairs sleeping loft. And in the majority of our sleeping lofts, we have what we call our no crawl loft. So you have a full head height walking area with a closet. So you don't have to worry about crawling. Crawling ends up being one of the reasons that people don't stay in tiny homes the most. And this is like a really great way to kind of get around that. And this is a unit that's a medium-term rental and is doing really well in the Northeast neighborhood. Permitting. So within the city of Portland, you don't have to pull any permits to place one of these things on your property. It again kind of makes things really easy for us. The only permits that need to be pulled our trades permits for when we run electrical and water and sewer out to the site. But those are minimal, and it's not, you don't need to apply for them. There's nothing to do there. And then the city kind of just doesn't even want to hear about it. You don't have to involve them at all. So, you reduce your permitting time to 0. Your design time is however long you want to spend with us designing. And then our build time is like 3 months. So it makes it's a pretty smart decision for a lot of reasons, but one of them is just taking advantage of the lack of permitting. And that's not to say, like, that is written on the city of Portland's website. So we're not getting through some sort of loophole. Truly, there's just no need for permitting at the moment. And like I was saying, so the only on-site construction that needs to happen is pulling of utilities. And so that is pulling electrical and sewer and water off the main house or wherever utilities are. And our contractors come in and just pull a trades permit to do that. And it's pretty easy and relatively inexpensive in consideration of all the other things. At this point, are there any more questions?
I just have just 2 questions, and I think we'll keep this moving along. But I think everybody does their own due diligence, right? If it's county or city, because I think I had shared in the chat Lane County's information, and in our county, tiny homes are kind of in that two category system, right? Is it on a permanent foundation? Now it has to file building permits and building code. Or is it on wheels? Does it need to follow HUD standards? And then they try to take it a bit further in terms of, does it have a fire sprinkler system? And does it have egress? So my question really is like adapting to those standards. Obviously, getting the information from the right people is important. But my question to you is like, does your design team work within, hey, this is where we're going to plan to build it. This is what we need for adaption. That's my question.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's our primary focus, because the last thing that we would want is somebody buying something that they then can't use. So we do like a feasibility study where we talk to local officials and we really find out what the local area needs. Cause like you were saying, it changes so much between area to area. And all of our units come with egress and all of those sorts of things. But if there's a specific need for an area, we are more than happy to do that. And it's part of our process is speaking with the local officials, figuring out what exactly needs to be done, and then sending over drawings or other things to double check and make sure that what we're doing is going to be accepted by the local municipality. Yeah, it can be pretty difficult to like round everything up because there's so many different folks that are trying to write rules about something that often they don't know about. And so it's part of our job to make sure that what we're producing is usable and functional for all of those reasons. But yeah, that's absolutely something we do.
Thank you, Nate.
Yeah. Anything else?
No questions right here on this slide, but I own some manufactured home parks, right? And we have a vacant lot that is part of our tax lot that me and my business partner were trying to have those conversations regarding installing some tiny homes and increasing, affordable housing in our area. And I think that's always a big challenge, is having the right conversations with the right municipalities to prove like, hey, we're not just trying to fill everywhere with tiny homes in every single inch of the city, but we're trying to create affordable housing. And what do we need to do in terms of accomplishing that as real estate developers or investors, to make it a win-win for the county and the community? So I just wanted to put that conversation point into this presentation, is that a lot of that starts with us as investors, developers, people and having conversations with your local municipalities about what do we need to do to get special use permits or a variance on the zoning, like anything that we can do to create affordable housing. Because here in Lane County, we're in kind of a housing crisis. We have an urban growth boundary. The only people who can build up are major corporations with big dollars, and there is no more land for people to just build allotments after allotments after allotments. But I think this part of the presentation is so important in terms of owning owning the process from a company standpoint and being like, hey, we're going to help you kind of navigate this before you pull the trigger. And I think that says a lot about your company, because we're dealing with this housing shortage down here and probably up there in Portland. So,
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And another responsibility of us is to, we definitely are making hay while the sun shines. You know, the city of Portland has relaxed a lot of their rules, but as a company, you know, adhering to building standards that are defensible. I think that right now our industry is in a really kind of, we're in our toddler phase or our adolescent phase, you know, and as we continue to grow, it's important that we show, like you were talking about, local municipalities that we're not trying to build crap, right? Like, excuse my language, but these aren't meant to be just homes that are built with zero thought, and these are really constructed to be lived in full time. And there's lots of thought put into every material that we use, and showing that this is an industry that can not only um, affect the housing market by producing more housing, but that housing is safe and reliable and all of those other things that you want that housing to be. And I think right now we're also seeing a bit of a race to the bottom in the tiny home market, which is a little defeating because it hurts some of that ability to be thoughtful in the way that we produce our homes and other things. And so that's like the majority of those two things. I think are like probably the most important parts of our jobs, other than just treating people with kindness, but also making sure that, you know, what we produce is livable. Because we see a lot of tiny homes that are built by well-meaning people, but they aren't following certain standards and all of those sorts of things. So, you know, as an industry, we need to take responsibility for that, and then and you know, just create the best practices and then follow those best practices. So yeah, we're trying to hit it on all fronts and really formalize our industry, because I think that it's an amazing opportunity. And what's really big for me and what motivates me to get out of bed in the morning is really increasing access to equity for middle class Americans and or lower class Americans. So, you know, doing like real estate investing or something like that, unless you get involved in a REIT or something, it can be really hard to break into that market. And what we're trying to create is a way that's approachable and acceptable for like the majority of Americans to be able to, like, you know, get real estate income. And not only that, but an affordable way for young folk to gain equity that they can then use if they decide to, you know, purchase a big house or something like that. So yeah, there's lots of very exciting things, and it's about, for us, it's just about doing, you know, following best practice and really trying to formalize the market in a lot of ways. So yeah, hit a lot of the nails on the head with those comments. So we have two different processes for our tiny homes on wheels. We have our Stanley starters, which those are all designed between 20 and 30 feet. The 30 footers have a uh, downstairs bedroom with a separate mini split and all of those sorts of things. Great for single level living. We see a lot of our folks that are wanting to move back home with their children who are a little older, choosing those units because it's much more affordable than, say, getting an apartment or renovating a garage. And then they get their own space, you know, on their children's property or things along those lines. So we build a lot of those for those folks. We also, and those have been designed to be kind of like the best bang for your buck and to maximize every kind of square inch. And we have three different model lines that, you know, go as small as 20 feet and as large as 30 feet. Our custom homes, so we have in-house designers and other folks. And when we design with people, it truly is custom, where they get to choose everything down to the last nail that's driven. And the process can take as short as it needs to take or as long as it needs to take. And our design process is a no commitment design process, where we accept a retainer and then charge it $65 an hour for design. And if by the end of it you decide that you want to build with somebody else, you can build with somebody else. That's totally fine. You get your design and 3D model and renderings and all that jazz. And then if you do decide to build with us, we cut that cost in half and absorb it into the admin fees for the home that you end up purchasing. Um, those are our primary two processes. One isn't better than the other. It just depends on what the needs of the client specifically is. For our pricing, our Stanley starters usually start at around 85 and they go up to 150,000 plus, depending on, the exact finishes that people want to use. But generally, our homes are right around $100,000. That can change depending on the number of units that we're building. If we really need to build to maximize if we need to cost engineer things, we can do that and we can bring that price down a little bit. But with the price of materials and labor anymore, it gets to be pretty hard to go any lower. But we do our best. And then for fully custom, we've found, we usually start at the same $85,000 mark, but after people get into their homes and really start designing things, we find that it usually comes up closer to that $100,000 mark. And the upper end, we don't reach that terribly often, but when we do, it's because that person really wanted something that was, where money wasn't an issue and they really wanted something super custom. With each of these homes that we purchase or that are purchased, we work with local suppliers who donate materials to us, and then we build sleeping pods that are donated to local organizations, like We Shine PDX and a few others. And so we just use our extra time to build those and donate those, which we think is an amazing cause to be fighting for. We offer financing. We partner with a mortgage company, 21st Century, who folks may be familiar with. They offer 25 and 30-year traditional financing, and it's at prime. They offer investor financing. The length of the note is largely dependent on the amount that is borrowed, but between 10 and 30-year financing, we can lump land improvements, and the home all into one loan. And for somebody that's doing a small village or something like that, we can put up to 4 homes on one note, and then we can run multiple notes if we need to. Sorry about that. And yeah, it's a really great, it's really great, and it's kind of rare. Most manufacturers are starting to get financing, but it's hard to find traditional 25 and 30-year financing at prime. But there are also access to private and hard money. There are individual lenders like Lightstream and a few others who are offering like private loans, and the terms on those just end up being a little less favorable, but they're also an option if somebody wants to go that route. And we have partnerships with those folks as well. Any questions about any of this or any of the last slides that I've covered?
2 questions. One from the last slide. What is the largest? Okay, so give us some dimension. Like, I know you mentioned your length, but like, what is the largest that you can build to basically make it mobile in terms of getting it from building site to home, right?
Sure. Yeah, we can build up to 12 and a half feet wide and up to 45 feet long.
Wow.
We've yet to build that big, but we totally can, and it's feasible. We're starting to do a lot of 10-foot wide units. Most of our units are 8.5 foot wide, which is standard in the tiny home market. But 10-foot units, they offer a lot for that increase by 2 feet in width. And so we're building more and more 10-foot wide units. And the benefit of building like an 8.5 foot unit is that anybody can tow them and you don't need a CDL. But we usually don't recommend that people be towing these things around all the time anyways. They're, built to be more of a livable space than they are meant to be like towed out to the country every weekend. And when clients come in and ask about that, we often refer them to traditional RV manufacturers, something that's a little bit more aerodynamic and a little less built less like a traditional home. That's not to say that you can't move it often. It's just not built for that. And so the reason that I bring that up is to say that we recommend that people hire professional transport companies to move these anyways. They have all the right insurance and that kind of stuff. And being that you'll hire a professional anyways, there's no reason not to go out to at least 10 feet. Anything bigger than 10 feet, you need a special permit and all this other kind of stuff. And so, 10 foot is kind of a sweet spot for the width. But so I hope that answers your question. We can build up to 12 and a half feet wide and up to 45 feet long. And then we can also do units that interlock together in really cool and custom ways, where if you wanted to create an L shape, or if you wanted to have two units that kind of click together, we can totally do stuff like that.
Got it. Second question. I just wanted to talk about the financing. This is super, super important because you don't know how many calls I get on the manufactured home side, not on real property, meaning it's in a park, that people are, then the number one hurdle is that they have some cash and they have a good amount of cash. They may have $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 down, which in traditional markets, like 3.5% down FHA loan, right? Or a VA, obviously at 0%. But the barrier of entry, right, is that the price point is always the problem, right? So I always see that when financing is offered in the case of your company and these units, right, now you have a price point that is manageable, but they're not buying a 1976 like depleted, wear and tear manufactured home for 85 to 100 grand. They're buying something that's brand new. Capital expenditures are going to be controlled. Repairs are probably going to come up in time, just like anything else, but they're being able to insulate themselves for a longer period of time while enacting financing. And I think I just wanted to bring that up, is that I thought that was very unique about the tiny home market, is that price point is typically people have to make a pretty big concession on quality of living situation. And I think this is what really is a great thing. Do you offer tours of current builds or demo models to visually see what might be preferable? From Jesus.
Absolutely. Yeah. We do shop tours. Our shop is in North Portland, just about as north as you can go. And we have a big 120,000 square foot warehouse that we build in. And anybody's welcome to come up. Just shoot us an email and we'll set up a time for you to meet with Megan, and she'll walk you through our currently available units. And then if you want to meet and discuss our floor plans or look at photos together or anything like that, we can absolutely have those talks as well.
Love it.
I think the financing piece, like you said, is super important. I mean, the majority of our buyers are, when they are financing, they're getting into a home for like $600 to $800 a month. And it's pretty incredible, and it's pretty heartwarming to even be able to see, especially for young couples and folks who just don't have the capital to break into the housing market. Much of the reason that my family is no longer in poverty, I grew up in poverty, is because we broke into the housing market, and we were able to take advantage of an FHA loan and get a 0% down loan and fill our home full of renters. And so it's really a beautiful way to be able to break in and change that cycle of poverty is really what's important to me. May not be important to all investors, but it's important to me, and it's part of our virtues as a company. And not only that, but we are launching a program, which is the first that I've talked about it publicly. But we're launching a program where we are offering property management as well, with the idea that we're going to be increasing the net income of middle-class Americans. And what we're planning to do and what we're putting in place is we are going to be offering a zero input rental. So you give us a parcel on your property, or not a parcel, but you give us an area on your property. We'll build your home. We'll furnish your home. We'll manage the rental. We'll build a fence. You'll never even see it. and we'll write you a check for the difference every month. And that difference, is likely to be between $800 to $1,000 a month. And not only that, but then they have equity, and they have, a second home where if something were to happen, they have someplace that they could go. They could stop using it as a rental. And we're really excited about that program, and we're getting that program off the ground. The caveat is that the financing would be in their name, but we would make the financing payments for them. And then we would just write them the difference every month for, what we bring in for rent versus what their monthly payment was. And it's really meant to just be an approachable and easy way to access a lot of things that are often held behind and not restricted for, but usually the only people that can access that sort of income are real estate professionals, are people that are in the industry. And so the hope is that it gets more people into that income stream.
No, I am. This is amazing that you're talking about this now, because the components of why people don't want to, the reason that we have a housing shortage is people, the number one objection I see is, I do not want to be a landlord. Right. So if you remove the property management aspect and you increase more accessibility to financing and a plan for implementation and management, that eliminates the biggest obstacle that's restricting housing unit production. Basically, that's why I see most people who are investing in stocks, bonds, other alternative measures, is because they're avoiding property management. They're avoiding the tenant interaction. They're avoiding being on call 24/7 to any problems that come up. And I think by you guys addressing that, it is going to be a game changer.
Yeah. And so that's kind of our secret sauce right now. And I think that it really, for us, it's a great sales pitch, right? And that's all that it is for us. We will charge for our property management, but it'll be at like a 10 to 15% rate. It'll just cover that person's salary, and as we get more and more homes underneath our property management guys, that percentage will become less and less to pay for that individual or that sector of our company. And then for us, it's a benefit because it's just, it makes sales easier. And then as a company, we have kind of three virtues and values, and those are, building the best relationships, building the best product, and building a better world. And it really, for us, just helps us to feel good about building a better world. And in spaces like Portland and Eugene, where you have these urban growth boundaries, and the only people that can afford to be making real estate income are the people that can afford to be building up, or giving up some of your livable space and building a downstairs basement ADU or building a garage ADU. We want to be the alternative to that, and we want to make it as zero hassle as possible, where if you don't want to see your renters, we put up a ton of arborvitae. They have their own separate entrance, and you never see them. And then if in 5 or 10 years you decide that you hate the game and you don't want to do it anymore, you sell it, and either through us or through somebody else, we come and hook up to it and we sell it for you, or somebody else sells it for you, or you sell it yourself. And then it's kind of a zero, you're out what you're in. And one of the cool things about our financing is our financing partner has relatively low down payments. And for somebody who's doing something like that, down payments can be, as low as 5 to 10%. It's a little higher than traditional, like the traditional housing market. But when you talk about the actual numbers, it's not that much more. And it's not, it's a lot less generally, sorry. And for somebody, there are areas where you can build these things to HUD standards and live in them full time on bare land. They can do bare land loans with improvements with the home at 0% down with the right credit score. I think it's above a 700. I can't remember. I'd have to look at my documents. But yeah, 0% down. You get bare land, which is, we all know how hard that is to find bare land at 0%. And then you also get all of the improvements, bringing utilities, all of those sorts of things, putting in septic and a home. And it can, all be done at 0%, which I think is pretty incredible. But those are kind of the next iteration of the things that we're getting off the ground. Before I move on, anything about that we'd like to talk about a little bit more? Okay, well, I'll continue. So this is our second to last slide. This is just a general question and answers, kind of common question and answers. So if somebody has a tiny home, they can, in the city of Portland, park them in any municipal or residential lot. Any residential lot. And then you can always park them in RV parks if worse comes to worse. And it's largely dependent on the local zoning laws and other things about where you can or can't park tiny homes. A big, like I had mentioned before, a big thing about those conversations is really making sure that we speak to the officials directly and educate them on what we're doing as far as what a tiny home actually is. And then learning to not take no when no isn't really the answer, when it's like, okay, if we tie this thing down, then can we park it there? If we, give you the HUD standard paperwork, then can we park it there? What is really required of us to be able to park it where we want to park it? The next one is like, can I put one on my property? And again, that's like a local zoning question, and our team is very happy and welcome to facilitate those conversations and have those conversations on your behalf. But it really depends, and it's again really about that education piece. Insurance can be a hard thing to find in the tiny home market. We have quite a few different folks that we partner with for insurance, and a lot of insurance agencies will require that homes are either certified by something like NOAA or the RVIA. And so I would highly recommend, if you decide to go tiny and you decide to have a builder, to make sure that that builder is following something and you get some sort of certification or paperwork out of that. There's a lot of benefits that come along with also being certified, but I would just highly recommend that in your tiny home search. Again, we just talked about financing, but we here offer both private loans and traditional 25 and 30-year mortgages. It's just a great option for most folks. And another question that we often get is like, why are tiny homes so expensive? And the way that we like to lay that out is, yes, on a per square foot basis, tiny homes are more expensive, but that's because you're taking the most expensive parts of a home and cramming them into 200 to 400 square feet. So in a tiny home, you have something like your bathroom and your kitchen all in 200 to 400 square feet. And you don't have these expansive living rooms, bedrooms, other rooms that are driving the price per square foot down. And instead, you have still these very expensive rooms that are your kitchen and your bathroom, without having a lot of that space that drives the square foot price down. So, our square foot prices on our tiny homes are usually around $400 a square foot. That's because we don't have those huge rooms to kind of like offset things. And a lot of money is saved in the fact that there's no permitting necessary. There's no, the opportunity costs, just there's a lot of ways to save money in other ways, but we get that question a lot where it's like, why is the square foot price so high? And so we just kind of like to have that conversation up front where it's like, yes, the square foot price is so high, but it's because we are doing the most expensive parts of a home in a small footprint. And I think that's the majority of what I had to discuss today. I'm sure there's many, many more things that we could talk about, but I kind of wanted to keep it short and sweet so that we could have tons of time to talk and discuss any questions that came up. Is there anything else that we'd like to talk about with our time here?
Well, we got our first question. Please talk about the repurchase from the manufacturer if they wanted to sell in the near future, if they don't like the tenant thing. Like, what justifies value of the tiny home? Is it a value subject to an appraisal, or kind of traditional real estate, or manufactured like resale ability, if that makes sense? Sorry.
Yeah. So I don't think it's like a traditional appraisal or any of those sorts of things. There are folks that specifically have created companies around those sorts of things, but largely it's just like taking a look at the market and listing it kind of like you would a vehicle. The market has continued to increase and expand, as have prices and other things. Tiny homes that we sold 5 years ago are worth more now than they were 5 years ago. But we are completely willing to handle that. So for one, the individual is completely like they can sell it on their own if they'd like. That's absolutely no issue. And then if they'd like to have us sell it, our commission is 5%. So we charge a 5% commission, and that just covers our sales folks. And then they sell it for you. And we're happy to either do that from your land, or we're happy to bring it back to our manufacturing facility and sell it from our facility. But that's generally how it works. It's not too much of a formal process. It's more so just a listing it and selling it kind of process.
Awesome. You mentioned rent is anywhere between $1,500 to $2,500. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? I think this question is for the Portland market.
Yeah. So the majority of tiny homes that we're seeing in the Portland market are being posted on like sites like Furnish Finders and other things. The Portland market in particular has a restriction on being able to use them as short-term rentals. That's not to say that people don't use them as short-term rentals. It's just not legal to do so. But all of that stuff is complaint-based. And anyway, there's lots of things. In the Portland market, we're seeing when people post them for medium-term rentals, so we're talking Furnish Finders, month-to-month, stuff like that. As a furnished rental, they are making between $1,500 and $2,200 a month, depending on the size and quality of the unit. And the people that live in them generally think that that's kind of a bargain. A studio apartment in the Portland area at a minimum is going for like $1,500 a month, leastwise from what I've seen. And so you offer somebody a full home with a yard and all these other things in a month-to-month basis or through Furnish Finders, and it's a pretty sellable product. The $2,500 number, you're getting more into like resort things, and you're getting more into short-term rental, because if you rent it out at $2,500 or $250 a night or $200 a night at a resort or at a wedding venue at 60% occupancy, I mean, I think you're still making $3,000 a month on that rental. And like the ones that we just shipped down to California, those will be rented out at $250 a night, and occupancy, I think for him is like 80% or something like that. So that's where the discrepancy comes in there, and the sky's more or less the limit on those sorts of things. But I try and be realistic and tone it down. But he's probably going to pay off his tiny homes in like 2 years, and then it's just straight revenue for him.
And if you want to do a value analysis, just reach out to me. I'm happy to send, I have a spreadsheet for short-term rentals. I have a spreadsheet for midterm rentals. I have a spreadsheet for long-term rentals. And I think anytime we can get a ballpark estimate of acquisition price and then market rent, then we can create a gross rent multiplier, what I call a fake cap rate, because it's not traded as 5+ units, but and then a price per square foot is, as we know, is going to be inflated, because this is like high-end finish, high-end quality built tiny homes, right? So if you're looking for something that is like a yurt that is used that you're buying on Craigslist for $10,000, this is not the option. But there's an economic model for an investor here that I think is very unique, especially in the markets that will allow a short-term rental. I believe in Bend, there was a short-term rental park that had several tiny homes, several Airstreams, and had built kind of a community of tiny homes / Airstreams with those same type of amenities: a small yard, a fire pit, a barbecue. And I think really it's how creative you are and what the local municipalities are doing and to create that seasonal or economic market for vacation rentals. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're seeing a ton of benefit from that. And I'd just like to say that I dabble in real estate, but a lot of my information is mostly self-taught. So I apologize if at all I err or any of those sorts of things. It's not on purpose, I promise. But yeah, I think, and more of that is coming. And if you look at just the economic upside of a lot of this, there's a space on the coast called Tiny Tranquility, and they have half of their units are there to stay in, and like half of their units are there, or half of their area is just a traditional like RV park, but it's all higher end stuff, right? Like a lot of what we do is just a rebranding of the mobile home industry. Like if we are to be like brass tacks about it, this is kind of just like the mobile home industry with like a fancy bow, and put in a way that is approachable and livable by the majority of Americans, or maybe not the majority, but by a large percentage of Americans. But Tiny Tranquility has created an RV park where a number of their units are short-term rentals, and a number of their units are just the land to park on. And I think the land to park on is anywhere between $800 to $1,200 a month in rent, just for the land itself, not including buying a tiny home or something like that. So the upside potential of creating something like a park or a village is pretty huge, and it's becoming more and more. There's just more and more of them going up. We're contacted all the time by people that are wanting to do that. The biggest hurdles that you come into when trying to do something like that is zoning and usage and all of those sorts of things. We've tackled that a few times. And so if there's anything that we can do to help, we are happy to help in that regard. A lot of it is just getting conditional use permits and finding the exact right property, and all of these other sorts of things. But it's a really cool opportunity, and a lot of folks are doing it.
Love it. Love it. One thing I just wanted to chat on is flood zones. Since these properties can be moved, I see a big hurdle with building in flood zones or next to a riverfront. And I think this is, for an investment standpoint, I just wanted to bring this up to everybody, is if you're thinking about, rejuvenating, like in the Mackenzie Rivershed, we had the fire, the fires a couple of years ago and last year as well. But there was a lot of property that was damaged, and people decided not to rebuild. Right. And now we have a situation where we have land in a beautiful spot next to a beautiful river, with always the question, is it a fire issue, or is it a flood issue? Right. And I think with tiny homes, it provides this element of, it's a mobile unit. So if there is, I'm not talking about a flash flood that happens in 12 hours, but I'm talking about, in the event that a flood does occur, you have the ability to remove the house. And I think that is what it creates a big opportunity for investors who are trying to set up these tiny home communities and having reduced risk in the longevity of the investment. And I think that's what I get from a lot of these, because people want destination investment communities. They want it next to the ocean. They want it in the forest. They want it to places where people want to go for vacation or rent in a midterm, short-term rental scenario. So this could be a great alternative to placing permanent structures that are at risk of flooding or being in a flood issue. Obviously, you'd have to check on insurance and local zoning, but I want to bring that up because I've got that question not once, but probably 20 times in the last 2 years up the Mackenzie, regarding, can I place a tiny home, for that reason. So I think that's good information. Does anyone go ahead?
Sorry. Yeah. And I apologize. There was something urgent that came up, but absolutely. And I mean, part of the reason that we started was because of the fires that happened in the Sandy Am watershed, and everything up near Detroit, Oregon, if people are familiar. My grandparents were living out of their RV, and the fire threatened them. And so many people in that area, and I grew up going that direction, like Mill City, fishing the Sandy Am. I love that area. And, just echo your point. It's rather unlikely that the same area burns twice, but if it does, what an asset to have, to be able to like take your vacation home and run with it, at the first start of, or at the first sign of a spark or something like that. And we get that question quite often, because I think a lot of people are thinking about that now and understanding that it's a bit more of a reality, even though it's not ideal. Right. So, yeah, I think we hit, a really special place there because of that, and it ties in really closely to why we're doing what we're doing. So
Totally. Well, let me ask if there's any remaining questions before we end this live stream, and thank Nate for coming. Anybody have any questions? Cool. Well, Nate, I just want to say thank you so much. We do these investor series webinars for no charge, just to get information out, put a spotlight on people who are doing the right things, the good things, and are just good people. And I think that was part of our initial conversation when we first met, was like, hey, like, I want to interview people who have the same ethos and DNA, that we're trying to create affordable housing. We're trying to build better communities. And I think that says a lot about Stanley Tiny Homes and yourself, of jumping on this webinar with us. So if anybody has any questions, here's all of Nate's contact information. If you're interested in the financing, any of that stuff, please reach out to us. We are here to help. And we're going to be doing these webinars once a month. So stay tuned. You can join us at Investing in Oregon. That is our YouTube channel. We have over 10,000 subscribers. And also you can connect with Nate directly or his staff. And yeah, just want to say thank you again, Nate, for spending the Saturday with us.
yeah, thanks for having me. This is the first time I've done something like this, so super excited about it. Before we go, I'll just show you what we did for the city of Portland's houseless population. If anybody's interested, if you're not, feel free to take off, no worries. But I will just pull up a few pictures really quick, because I think that there are some really interesting opportunities within, what would you call it, within the investment market to do something similar. So just give me one sec here.
Yep.
Okay, can you see my screen here?
Let me add it to the presentations. Give me 1 second. Add to stage.
All right. So when we originally moved back to Portland, we were down in Corvallis and Philomath area for a while. When we originally moved back to Portland, my family experienced houselessness and housing insecurity in the Portland area, and I was pretty unhappy with the way that we were housing or sheltering unhoused folks. And so I approached the city, originally offering to donate pods to them, because I wanted something that was more dignified and more livable for that population. What we ended up coming to and building for them, and they ended up purchasing a bunch of them are these sleeping pods. They're 8x8 units. We can build them any size. They have a porch, and they're really cute. These are up near St. John's. They're right off the cut in St. John's. And they took a otherwise tent village that was housing 60, 70 people, and they formalized it and made it into something that I think actually came out really beautiful. And there's a shared bathroom, shared kitchen, and there's now these units that are meant to be lived in, that are hosting folks and helping them to get out of a hard time. Each of these units comes with a mini split. It comes with a ton of windows. They're arranged in a way that's really attractive. And I think doing something like this could also be a way to increase a lot of beds for very minimal cost, if there was ever the opportunity to do so, say in Sun River, where you needed a bunch of cabins for skiers or something along those lines, where we can build these units rather inexpensively. Then you have a shared kitchen, shared bathroom, and all of a sudden you've added 60 individual dormitories or something along those lines. So these units in particular were built to be identical, and they were built to be resilient and to not be damaged. And so we use a specific wall paneling and all this other kind of stuff, but this could all be changed in order to be much more inviting, I should say, to maybe a higher end client or something like that. But this is what we built, and the majority of the reason is just because we think that people should have access to dignified space. This isn't political at all, but just saying that if we're going to be spending the money on something, might as well be nice. And then I think that this is a great opportunity to also say that something like this could be built for a, say Mount Bachelor wanted to do this. It's totally possible, and we can build these units really cheaply. And then, all of a sudden you have 60 beds that you can charge $150 a night for, or something like that. So just wanted to throw that in your ear because it's another idea that we've had. But if anybody's interested, or if anybody would like to talk more about our pod work, please contact us and let us know. We would love all the constructive criticism. And yeah, like you said, we're here for you. So if you need anything, just give us a call, send an email, send a text, any of that jazz. Otherwise, thanks for being here, and I really appreciated the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Nate. Appreciate everybody jumping on, and this episode will be on YouTube, so you guys can play it back or share it with clients. And I just want to say thanks again, Nate. Really great meeting you again, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Not a problem. Good to see you. Take care.